Welcome to Choose the Nickel. I'm your host, George Bailey. My co-founder and technical support is the gorgeous Christina Bailey. This podcast is about giving kids financial freedom. We're interviewing fascinating people for their insights about how children learn to be financially savvy. Our guests come from diverse, sometimes conflicting schools of thought, and we love the opportunity to learn from them. We encourage all to weigh our guests' ideas on how to help children thrive, both financially and in general. We invite you to visit our website at www.choosethenickel.com, subscribe to our newsletter, and try out the things we are learning on the podcast. Our next guest is Shawn Askinosie, founder of Askinosie Chocolate, named by Forbes as one of the 25 best small companies in America. Shawn was named by the Oprah magazine, as one of 15 guys who are saving the world. He is a family brother at Assumption Abbey, a Trappist monastery near Ava, Missouri, and the author, along with his daughter Lauren, of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, Meaningful Work, The Quest to Do Great Business, Find Your Calling, and Feed Your Soul. Ladies and gentlemen, Shawn Askinosie. Shawn Askinosie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Shawn, I have to tell you, first of all, that with me today, we actually have a guest along with you in this interview, and it is this. And for those who cannot see, this is the Philippines 62% dark milk chocolate with fleur de sel. And I've got to tell you, Shawn, it's amazing. Okay, so I brought it along, and if you don't mind, while you talk, I'm just going to have a little bit of a nibble for inspiration.
Yes, okay? Please. Thank you.
So my first question for you is, what are your greatest professional achievements?
I'd say the first one would be I founded a grief center for children and teens who've experienced the death of a parent or sibling, and I co-founded that grief center here in Springfield, Missouri about 20 years ago. I've remained involved with the organization ever since, and I'm also a teen facilitator working with teenagers who've experienced the death in the family. That would probably be my greatest professional accomplishment. Another one, which you might think, well, this doesn't sound professional, but that is my association with Assumption Abbey, a Trappist monastery in the Mark Twain National Forest in South Missouri, where I've been involved for 17 years, but as a family brother for 5 years. And then, of course, Chocolate University, which I founded when I started the chocolate company to engage children in my neighborhood in Springfield in our business, to inspire them that business can be a force for good in the world and that there's a world beyond Springfield, Missouri. And I just a couple of days ago returned from Tanzania, where I brought 15 local high school students to meet cocoa farmers.
Give me a demographic breakdown on those children. Who are these kids that you're helping out?
The kids in my neighborhood, well, first of all, we have an elementary school program, a middle school program, a middle school summer program, and then high school students. So we have juniors and seniors who compete to be part of this Chocolate University high school program. They write essays, go through interviews, and half of them are private pay. Their parents are cardiologists or whatever, and they can afford the $4,000. The other half are students who are very bright, super motivated, but are financially not well off at all and can't afford this experience, and many of them have never even been on an airplane. So I raised the money to bring those kids on this program, and that's the demographic. But super, super smart, motivated kids who we believe will use this experience as a catalyst for them as they go into college and beyond.
I'm moving my children down to Springfield, which is I'm not going with them. I'm just going to put them down there. Okay. I've got too much to do in St. Louis, but I think that they'll do great at your chocolate university. And when they come back and kind of, tell me your craft, that'll be great. But I hope that you are not offended, but I have a difference of opinion with you on your greatest accomplishment. This right here. And you can hear that snap. Okay. This right here, Shawn, this piece of chocolate is your greatest accomplishment professionally, as far as I'm concerned. Okay.
Thank you.
I'll tell you a little bit about that. That snap, you can hear it just for the listeners. If you break your chocolate and you hear a good snap, that means that it has been very, very well treated. And I love that about your chocolate. You do great stuff. So go out there, get an Askinosie bar, everybody, dark milk chocolate. I'm not exaggerating when I say that this is, of all the dark milk, and that's a very specific kind, this is the best out there. No exaggeration. Now, I have to ask a follow-up question to your greatest accomplishments, and that is, if you could connect that success to a single childhood experience or a series of experiences during your childhood, what would that be?
That would be, and I think this is the case for many people, our success is oftentimes tied to our broken hearts. And so I talk with students around the country, high school students and college students, about this very issue. That is, where does it hurt? Where did your heart break? And we find, as Khalil Gibran said, and I quote in my book, that our greatest joy is our sorrow unmasked. So that's the case for me. The things that I talked about as accomplishments directly spring from the death of my father when I was a teenager, and it had a huge impact, obviously, on me and my family. And so the experiences that I talked about really result from my broken heart that I've been able to, on many days, turn into great joy that I would have never imagined.
I love that answer, and it's very powerful, and I appreciate your having the willingness to share that. I think that a lot of listeners need to understand that you can take that pain and make something very beautiful out of it. You talked about this, I was just telling you before we started this episode that my wife and I have started reading your new book, which is called Meaningful Work, A Quest to Do Great Business, Find Your Calling, and Feed Your Soul. And in the introduction of that book, you share that same experience very, very visually. It's a very intense thing. What are your thoughts on how we can take that pain as children? I mean, how is it that, or rather as parents, how is it that we can help our children to take painful experiences and turn them into something good?
The first thing that we can do as parents is talk about it with our children. We find in our culture that often we don't talk about painful experiences with our children because sometimes they happen also to us as parents, and we don't want to hurt our children. And we have this mistaken notion that by talking about it, that we'll stir it up and will just cause more emotional harm, when in fact the opposite is true. So the first thing I tell parents is, depending on the age of your child, answer their questions. Answer the question. Have an open dialogue about this pain and brokenheartedness, and be willing to let your child assimilate that answer, that dialogue and discussion, go and play or whatever they do, and then come back and ask more questions. And the thing I say is, it's important for parents to help children remember and then to survive remembering. That's the key. So if we as parents can teach our children to survive remembering painful experiences, then that's the kind of resilience that will really hold them in good stead for the rest of their lives.
Can you tell me a little bit more about where you grew up, the setting, the type of work that your father was doing, your mother was doing?
Sure. I grew up in Springfield, Missouri, born in St. Louis when my dad was in law school at WashU, like you, and then we moved to Springfield, and he started a general practice and practiced mostly criminal law before he died. He was a lawyer for about 11 years before he was diagnosed with cancer and died. And my mom was a homemaker and didn't complete college. And after my dad died, my mom was raising two young boys on her own, so she went back to college. She got her degree, and then she got her real estate license and started working. And that was when my dad died, because I was so involved as a 14-year-old in everything about what was happening with his health. I went to doctor's appointments with my mom. I helped take care of him. And when he died, I remember having a deep fear that my mom wouldn't be able to make any money and that we would just, become destitute. And it really was a deep fear that I had. And I was able to see my mom go back to school, start work, raise us, and, make her way through it. And it was quite a thing to see. And I wish that I'd had a greater appreciation of that at the time and as a young person. My mom has since died as well, but I really have a great admiration for how she did that.
In the home where you grew up, was it more rural, or what was kind of the setting in terms of, what you guys did around the home?
It was interesting. We grew up, in a kind of a quasi-rural setting. So we had 3 acres and, so I spent a lot of time mowing the yard and doing stuff like that. But within about a 45-minute drive, my grandparents, my mom's parents, had a big farm. And so I spent, I would say, and especially in my early years, half of my time on that farm. And so it was a great experience to really see firsthand what it's like for people. My grandparents, went to the same church for over 60 years. They lived in the same house for over 60 years. They were married 65 years. They, were kind. They weren't highly educated. They worked really hard. They loved the farm. And I would say that experience of being on their farm is maybe the driving force behind my business today.
Did you have any experiences of troublemaking, or, what kind of a kid were you in terms of obedience and activity?
Well, at least for what I can say on the record, without the benefit of counsel present during that question, I can say, and I was a juvenile at the time, at least that you're asking this question. So, yeah, after my dad died, and this is not uncommon for teenagers, I pretty much just did whatever I wanted to do. My mom was busy going to college and trying to, be a grieving widow at 37 years old. And so I just basically had no supervision in high school and did what I wanted. I got a job as soon as I could drive, and I started working for a law firm when I was 16 years old. So I worked every day after school and made money. I was grieving myself in a different way. And so I sort of pushed away from my family then, and my mom and my brother, and I just wanted to spend time in this law firm and working. And that's what I did. I worked a lot.
But you also worked in school.
I did work, and I was, something that was really important to me at that time and a great release was speech and debate. And so I did that and went to nationals and was really involved in student government. Boys State governor 40 years ago this year. And so I was very active politically. I worked on campaigns as a young person in high school. And so I was, I was using these things to do as a way of grieving. And when I say that, what I mean is I tried to accomplish and achieve every single thing that I could in my path, believing for, almost 25 years that was going to be my path to happiness.
Wow. Thank you very much. A very cool look. One of the paragraphs that jumped out to me in your book talked about a Mr. Paul Elmore, who was your 6th grade teacher. What exactly was it about him that had such a huge impact on you? And can you give me a little bit more background on who he is and how that fits into your life?
Thank you for asking that question, George. That's maybe the most important question I can answer. That's I think it's on page 56 of my book. And the way this happened was, yep. Mr. Elmore was my 6th grade teacher, and he is the genesis point for all of the work that I do with students now that I described to you at the beginning of your show. And the reason is because he was my 6th grade teacher, and during that time, my dad was sick. So Mr. Elmore knew what was happening in the home. He knew my dad was sick, and he was nice to me. He was kind. It wasn't anything fancy. There wasn't anything special that he did. He was simply kind to me when I was in pain. Then what I mean is sometimes he'd write notes on my homework papers and say, hey, great job, or I know your dad's really proud of you, or you're going to be a lawyer like your dad someday. And,
and he really nailed it on that one.
Yeah, he did. And these acts of kindness, for all I know, coincided with moments of real pain for me, with my dad getting home from chemotherapy treatments and being sick and me helping take care of him. And so those simple acts of kindness are, things that I'll never forget. And what I want to do is I want to honor Mr. Elmore, who I still am in touch with. I want to honor him by trying to be him to students that we work with in the Chocolate University program.
You know, it's interesting because I had my own teachers, of course, and I think we all do, or at least I hope we all do. And I remember in the second grade, I had Mr. Davis, and the man was the kindest man on the face of the planet, and he saw my talent for mathematics and really, fed that. And then I went for a while with having, that teacher with whom I shared that special connection. And I had a couple teachers maybe through middle school and high school. But then I remember the next teacher was actually in adulthood. I was at Brigham Young University and I had Lynn Henriksen, who watched me teach Danish. This guy had enrolled in my Danish class, which was scary when you have a professor come into your class.
Yeah. That's cool.
And he just, afterwards, he would stick around and just talk to me. And
wow.
He saw something there that nobody else had seen. And I didn't know I was going to be a good teacher. And I was a teacher for 9 years, and I still consider myself to this day a teacher. I work professionally in the financial services sector, but I just can't go without it.
Yeah.
And I think that for those of us like you and me who have had that impact from somebody else, we love that idea of mentoring, and there's something powerful there.
Well, it's powerful, and what you've just described is this notion of breadth or depth, not breadth. In other words, we can have such an impact on 2 or 3 people and really develop a relationship with them, inspire them, and mentor them. And what we find is that we receive from them as well. And this is where we have opportunities to express compassion and kindness and receive that back. To me, this is life, and this is what we're called to do. And in other words, I don't think we're called necessarily to serve thousands and thousands of people. And I think true sustainability happens when you have teachers like the one you just described. And that's, to me, very, very important part of life.
You hit on a very interesting point, and that is that, I think all of us dream of being able to impact as many people as possible. But think about it. If each of us focused on just impacting 2 or 3,
right,
that impact would be so deep and so meaningful, and there's enough of it to go around.
Well, and that's why chapter 5 of my book is about something that we call reverse scale. And I want to parenthetically mention that my daughter, Lauren, is my co-author in this book. And that was a really meaningful experience as a parent of an adult child to write this book together and really deepen our relationship as father-daughter. And that was really cool. But chapter 5 is about reverse scale, and it's what we're talking about now, which is this culture we're in tells us that in order for our idea to be valuable, it must be scalable. And investors, chambers of commerce, family members, partners, they want to know, will it scale? Will it scale? How quick can we roll this out? And how many people will it impact? And how much money? What's our ROI? And what I'm trying to encourage people to think about is, wait a minute, let's take a step back and say, can we redefine this notion of success and say, just what you just said. What if we impact 2 people or 3 people? Can we then say that our idea will have value because of the depth of the impact on those 2 or 3 people and the impact that it will have on us and the transformation of our own hearts? That's sustainability. And I think that as a culture, as an economy, and especially in our companies, that we need to really reassess whether or not we scale for scale's sake.
Absolutely. A couple times you actually ran counter to things that I hear all over the place. That was one great example. Another one, of course, is that, the bottom line is profit. And if you're not growing, you're doomed to failure. What's your thoughts on that?
The notion of grow or die has become so ingrained. We've become so conditioned. Really in the world. I mean, because we've decided as a world that we're going to use GDP as a measure of our health. And that measure, that metric filters its way all the way down to my little company, with 16 people. And the outside observers would say, well, you're only growing at, 6% or 7%. You should be growing at 20% every year, revenue, year on year sales. And what I'm saying is that I think it's important to resist that notion. And there's a reason. The reason for it is, if you resist that, you have a greater opportunity to have human scale or reverse scale. That is a connection with one other person. When you're so focused on scale, you as the entrepreneur, you as the leader, you run the risk of losing the tether that brought you to the thing to begin with. There was something that inspired you, me, us to do the work that we do. And the thing that we run the risk of losing is that connection if all we're focused on is scale. So I say, as Thomas Merton said, if you want to discover your true self, which is what we're trying to do here, at least for me, I want to be in discovery and pursuit of my true self, my soul as God created it to be. And I can't do that if all I'm focused on is growth. I can't. And I need to be in a business where I can focus on the transformation of my own self. That's hard enough. I don't need to worry about 1,000 people. I need to worry about me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's go back to your childhood a little bit more. I want to know about your relationship with money at that point. You were making money. You were out there working. You were even campaigning. Oh my goodness. I had no political sense until years later. But what was your relationship with money like? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Did you fear it?
Money was secondary to me, and remains secondary to this day. So as a child, I got an allowance and I did work. I didn't like doing the kind of chores that I had to do for that, and my first jobs, I was a caddy at a country club, which I hated, carrying doctors' golf bags around, for aging health. What's that? Why I hated it?
Why did you hate it so much, though?
The guys that I caddied for were just mean. They weren't very nice people, and they got mad if I would lose their balls and they couldn't keep it in the fairway. And, it just wasn't a great experience. But to your question about, I didn't have a love of money. I didn't sit around and think about how much money. What I did sit around and think about, which was, how can I pursue this thing and pursue this thing of excellence and win? So I thought more about winning. And whether it was in speech and debate, whether it was elections, whether it was jury trials, whatever. That my focus was on winning. And then ultimately, I spent years focused on being recognized as a winner, being recognized as someone who could take something, build something, and win, and be recognized for it. And then in my later years, I've become aware of that, which I believe it's fine to want to pursue excellence, but for me personally, it becomes not fine if I want to view myself with omnipotence, that I am a God, because I'm not. I've spent recent years trying to practice humility. And I did not have that relationship with money or recognition in my early years. Humility was not part of the equation.
Humility is not part of most children's equations.
Right. But I think as parents, it's very important for us. And I did not, I'm not saying I did this, but
I hear you.
If I had it to do over again, I would say, can we role model humility for our children? And as my daughter, when she was 16 when I started this company, and she started working for me, and I will say, in her older, adult years and in her 20s, she has seen me go from making a ton of money as a lawyer to making almost not much money at all as a chocolate maker, and she's seen that, and I'm glad that I've had the chance to model that for her.
That's great. That's great. And that's such a powerful drive to win. I don't know if I would describe my own drive as a kid then. I think that I had a little bit more insecurity about it. Where do you think that came from? I mean, was your dad the type that liked to go out there and win? Your mom the type? Your grandparents the type?
Not necessarily. I mean, my father was a Marine and was a drill instructor in the Marine Corps. And so that was an interesting, experience being raised by a drill instructor. But no, my drive to win, is a result of the pain. I thought the pain would go away. I thought I could drive the pain away with winning, and achievement and notoriety. I thought all of those things would drive the pain away. And so many of us in the North American culture, I can't speak to others, but we believe that, we behave that way. And look, man, there are so many great companies and great institutions that have been created out of pain. And we're thankful that those places are around. But I sometimes feel sympathy for the creators of those ventures who have been saddled with pain and in many cases closed hearts for much of their lives. And I feel bad about that.
I can derive from a lot of your answers that when it comes to Chocolate University, much of what you are teaching your youth is values oriented. In terms of practical, kind of, in practical, I think values oriented is highly practical. I don't want to imply that it's otherwise. But in terms of the actual economic lessons that these kids learn in Chocolate University, can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. One of the things that we do, they spend a week on the Drury University campus before we go to Tanzania. And one of the aspects of the things that we're teaching them is our financial statements. We practice open book management here. I've practiced open books for 20 years. I did it as a lawyer. And so we then teach that to our students to the extent that you can in a week. But what we're saying to the students is, look, here are our financials. Look at them. Here's what we do. Now, students, guess what? We're going to take these financials. We're going to translate them into Swahili, and we're going to go to Tanzania, and we're going to open our books to the farmers who've been seeing my financials in Swahili for the last 10 years, so they're not going to be surprised by this. And then, students, not only are we going to open our books to them, we're going to profit share with them, and we're going to show them the calculation that we use to share profits, and we do that every year. And the lesson for the students, the financial lesson for them is a business can survive and thrive and open their books to suppliers and share profits with them. And they get to see this unfold in real time, and they get to experience the appreciation of these farmers for the profit share, for the relationship that we have with them and the partnership that we have with them. They literally have front row seats to this, and it's transformative for many of the students, especially students who are interested in business. They're just completely blown away by this. They haven't seen anything like this before, and we want them to understand that it's possible. These things are possible. It's not perfect. There's some messy stuff with it, but it is possible.
Springfield, Missouri, Shawn. That's where my kids are going right now. Okay, I'm putting them on a bus. So at least with their high schoolers, okay, maybe something like that. But that's awesome. I mean, I can't even begin to name an experience I had similar to that in high school, and I would have loved to have had that. I think that I would encourage business leaders out there who are listening, look at this model. Find opportunities to, first of all, make your business transparent, because I think that that's the underlying principle here, honesty and transparency. But then, what can we do to get these kids involved? I think that that's great.
Yeah. Thank you.
You said that you co-wrote this book with your daughter, Lauren. Am I saying it correct?
Yes, Lauren.
Lauren, you co-wrote this book with your daughter, Lauren. How is that dynamic in the workplace? I mean, that's got to be, not everybody should be working with their kids. I can tell you that right now. But you're doing it, and it's working out. That's wonderful. Tell me more.
Yeah. She's been involved in the business since she was in high school. She's a great writer, and now she's our chief marketing officer and a leader in the company. And I depend on her regularly and daily for strategy, and she's just been a driving force in a lot of the social issues that we've tackled around the world, especially as they relate to empowering women entrepreneurs. But it's, she's a lot like me, so she's stubborn. We've had, pretty intense meetings in the past and discussions. But I will say that one of the really cool things about writing this book with her is she was able to talked to me. We wrote the book remotely. So she lives in Austin, Texas, and I live obviously in Springfield, but she was able to kind of pull out of me words to describe the experiences that I had that were very personal. And it was hard. It took 3 years to write this book. But one of the roles that she played was kind of helping me articulate and put into words this challenging story of my life that I could tell the story in a way so that other people could have the chance to see themselves, and not just, oh, this is the Shawn story, but this is a story that other people can relate to. And she helped me do that in a big way.
My last question for you is, what is your very favorite charitable cause? And actually, I'm gonna assume that at least part of that is what you do directly. But tell me more about that, and tell me more about a separate one with which you don't have as much involvement.
My daily life in Chocolate University and the work that we do is so the community development. We're building a preschool in this village in Tanzania. The whole thing is so interconnected that the quote charitable work is inseparable from the work. They're so tied in together that I couldn't separate them if I wanted to. But to answer your question to a separate kind of entity that I'm not, that I don't work for, would have to be Lost and Found, the grief center I mentioned that I co-founded. That is a charitable organization that's near and dear to my heart and has been for 20 years. And so I am proud of the organization and happy that we're available to children who need us.
What's your favorite success story from that institution?
I work with teenagers, and in some cases their parent or sibling died, a few weeks ago. And I think maybe my favorite personal success story from that is when teens that are in our group are really suffering and having a difficult time, they'll reach out to me or to others. And then later in life, they look back and find us and say that we helped them through this difficult time, and that they wouldn't have been able to make it through life if it wasn't for the work that we did with them to help them heal from this terrible grief they're suffering in their lives. So that, I've seen story after story after story that relate to me and others that I work with. And that is really, really gratifying to know that I had some small part in a child healing from the death of a parent or sibling.
Shawn, these have been some really beautiful stories, and I greatly appreciate your willingness to share them with me and with my audience. I would tell my audience right now, I'm dead serious. If you've never had Askinosie chocolate, yes, it's expensive. You've admitted as much, but it is so worth it for a different chocolate experience. I love the work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, George. And I hope, all joking aside, I do hope you will come visit me in the chocolate factory. I'd love to show you and your family around someday.
Oh, we will do that.
Okay.
Everybody else, thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the interview and found useful ideas about things you can do with your kids. Be sure to check the show notes at www.choosethenickel.com for links to names, books, and other resources we discussed in today's show. Also, please subscribe to our newsletter and visit our contact page where you can give us feedback. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and YouTube, and you can follow Choose the Nickel on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We invite you to share Choose the Nickel with your friends and join us in our quest to teach kids financial freedom.